Hi everyone, I'm back. And we have some women on the panel. Okay, it's been a very long day, I know, long evening rather. I hope all of you have not OD'd on AI yet. We have this panel which is extremely loaded. How can India become the AI use case powerhouse? And we have some power-packed panelists really looking forward. I'm going to start with the women on this panel with a very loaded question as well. India has scale, it has talent, it is getting there in terms of digital infrastructure. What do you think is good, what will it take to translate all of these into globally relevant, high impact AI use cases? Kalika, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, finally we have some women on the stage. So, okay, I think the previous panel kind of touched on what I believe is the case. There has to be a lot more cross-cutting initiatives, less of siloing. We have the ability to, this is something that I think Nandan said, and it's just so relevant, that use case powerhouse. India is a use case powerhouse. But I do really believe that a lot of work is being done in silos. Like, we need the ecosystem to work in such a way that we build on each other instead of, just do our own stuff and take it forward. So that's what I think is the necessity of the time.
Absolutely. Geeta, you are currently running Niramai, which is, I think, an excellent example of a use case. Tell us, what do you think is the opportunity that lies in this gap that's there?
I think, first of all, it's great to be on in this forum, platform, etc. It's an amazing, meeting of minds. So, again, as some of the earlier panelists mentioned, I think India is already a powerhouse of great talent, which needs some nudging, needs some focus, needs some laser sort of integration, as Kalika mentioned as well. But one of the biggest things I think we should do is, I like Jugaad, okay? You have to do with minimal, do more with less is exactly where, Indians can shine. But Jugaad with highest quality is important. Jugaad doesn't mean it works once and fails 100 times. That is not acceptable. I think we need to make that from the beginning, like whenever you're appreciating a student project or anything, what have you tested with? Where did you test it? I have seen people coming out and saying, here is a machine learning model, 99% accuracy. First thing I ask is, what is your testing platform? How did you test? What did you test again? I think that's very critical, right? And being honest about it, Again, we all know how AI can be built and results can be gotten, right? Some of us have actually done it. The training set and test set, and how do we sort of separate the two to get the best results? We know some of the scientists tend to do it also. So, but are there enough levels of randomization put in? There are several elements of this high quality thing. I think just that appreciation for performance, appreciation for, of course, data privacy, all of that again, right? And overall, international standards of offering is all we need to do. So I think incentivizing that is most important. Absolutely. I love Jugaad again, but yeah, that's the missing piece.
Very well put. Ganesh sir, I'd like to bring you in, coming to the use cases itself. I mean, how can foundational models like a Bharat Gen be adopted to sort of support high-impact sectors, which I spoke about in the earlier panel as well, such as healthcare? We have two wonderful health tech startups here, agriculture, education, and many more.
Thank you for this question. So let me give a little bit of the background, the genesis of Bharat Gen.
Yes.
It's funded by the Department of Science and Technology through their NMI CPS program, through a Section 8 company at IIT Bombay called the Technology Innovation Hub. Now, what is the intent of a technology innovation hub? It's basically to take academic research to TRL level 8, effectively, but not necessarily commercialized. And Dr. Chris Gopalakrishnan, he was there at our recent Bharat Gen Summit. He shed a lot of light on how the diffusion actually has to happen through companies, to startup. So the genesis of this Bharat Gen consortium was deep tech, bring deep tech. So yes, you need jugaad, you need engineering. I don't like the word jugaad, but engineering. But the engineering has to work closely with science. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
Take it to a level that the industry can diffuse.
Okay.
And the other important aspect is, while we are funded by the Department of Science and Technology, Mr. Abhishek Singh was here some time back, we work very closely, and we have been asked to work very closely with the India Mission, Ministry of IT. In fact, we just recently had a Bharat Gen Summit where we launched a whole bunch of models.
Yeah.
And we had very good industry presence, excellent presence from academia. And there were on the stage secretaries from 5 or 6 different departments: Department of Science and Technology, Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances, Skills. I think this whole of government approach has to trickle down to whole of India approach. We need to work together. And thankfully, Bharat Jan has been set up with that intent.
Yes.
I like to quote this Sanskrit verse, this Subhashitam, which is a big inspiration for me. Amantram aksharam nasti, nasti moolam anaushadham, ayogya purusho nasti, yojakastratta durlabha. So the yojaka, the very important aspect of connecting, complementarity, is what we are trying to do at Bharat Jan.
Wow, that's very, very interesting. A round of applause for the kind of work that you guys are doing. Prashant, coming to you, Cure AI has been doing some fantastic work, and before you came in, I think your work has been quoted in the last couple of panels as well, in terms of how incredible it is. In terms of inclusion, as I understand, a large market that you guys have is the US and not India, right? It is a challenge, right? And an opportunity at the same time. How do you work to make, the technology that you have more affordable and accessible?
I think, see, for us, when we started out building Cure, we started about close to 9 years ago, when the wave of AI had not yet started, or at least there was a previous wave of AI which started in 2012 with the publication of a paper called, I think it was the AlexNet or ResNet, one of the papers from 2012, right, from University of Toronto. And that wave of AI is when we started in 2015. We said, if AI can understand regular images, can it also understand radiology images, right? And sort of started building that technology. And as we got into it, one of the things we realized is in healthcare, you cannot make mistakes. So from an AI perspective, it has to be extremely, extremely accurate. Data governance, data has to be, there is so many compliances, so many laws across HIPAA, GDPR across different countries, right? Every country has their own data compliance mechanisms. You have to adhere to those. Every country has their own regulatory clearances. US has FDA, spoke about the US market. We have 18 FDA clearances. We are cleared in, more importantly, about 90 to close to 100 countries now. And that sort of allows us to sell in those countries. And the most important thing is that all of this, especially if you're building clinical AI products, it has to be backed by evidence. It's like a drug, right? If you will not take a drug if it is not backed by evidence or real world evidence or even clinical trials, right? Just like that, a medical device AI like what Cure is building has to be backed by a lot of evidence. So we always started with the perspective that we have to do cutting edge research, starting with engineering, and many people studied with Ganesh at IIT Bombay. We have probably 30, 40 IIT computer science graduates from Bombay, right? And started with a strong engineering, data science team, build great technology, get the evidence, and then sort of you get the right to play in various markets, US, UK, Africa, Southeast Asia, India. And that then, of course, you have to figure out how to sort of embed AI into clinical workflows, because again, AI is just a technology. It has to finally help make a decision, right? If you look at AI, Gmail has a lot of AI, but you are using it as an email tool, right? Netflix has a lot of AI. Again, it's something that that is helping you watch the right shows and movies. So again, for a clinician, you have to figure out how to embed AI into their workflows, whether it's reading a scan, whether it is summarizing EMR data, or converting a conversation with a patient to nuggets that can be inserted into an EMR. So I think we have gone through that journey and learned a lot as we sort of built out Cure.
Very interesting. Anand, finally bringing you in from an investor lens. What makes an AI startup in India truly scalable and fundable, especially when you're solving for Bharat more than solving for India?
Yeah. No, thank you. But I think when you're solving for India, right? So I think there's a lot of talk about India doesn't have the size, right, or the market. Like,
Yes.
I
Yes.
completely disagree with that. Like with all the panelists, sorry. Yeah. I think India is a 4 trillion economy, like going to 10, and then obviously the value, it's a value conscious audience. So AI is a leveler, right? So globally you can build the best technology now, and it's getting more and more available for everyone. And India has now the second largest talent base for AI. If you look at GitHub submissions and all that, we have the talent, the technology is there, and we have the largest consumer base who have, all of them have a smartphone, right? Like 500 million people are doing transactions, doing Paytm or like phone pay. Like, so you have a really available audience all through India. Tier 1, Tier 2, anywhere. If you go to villages, we spend a lot of time in Bharat. So there are a lot of problem statements yet to be solved. And these are all opportunities in India which can be solved, many of them using AI, right? And then you can bring down the price quite a bit by doing this. As an example, I think someone touched upon it. Arivihan is a company that we seeded through Atoms or pre-seed program. And they went after a very specific problem. Madhya Pradesh Hindi board exams. If you take tuitions, everyone takes it, but you go to the best tutor you can find in the neighborhood. But what they said is, can we bring the best tutors, personalized for you, video tutors? And those ambitious young founders who started that. And this year they got the best results, like some of the best results, the toppers are from their program within 18 months of starting. This is one of the 40 companies that Prashant talked about. So there are problems available abundantly. It's for entrepreneurs to dream bigger. And what the Servam founder said, let's solve for India, now take it global, right? How can we go dominate the world, right? So.
Wonderful. Kalika, bringing you in. I mean, we can't not talk about languages when we talk to you. How do you ensure that language models are not just linguistically accurate, but also culturally relevant? And I know context is something you feel very passionately about. You could possibly also give the key lime example, as you're given me as well. But tell us how important context is.
So the key lime example is this, that any machine translation system, the best in the world between Hindi and English, if you ask it to translate from English, John and Mary have a key lime pie that they need to divide between 5 people, right? It's a math problem, it's a fraction problem. I can guarantee that there's no translation system in the world which will not translate it into Hindi, and excuse me, people who do not understand Hindi, to John और Mary के पास एक key lime pie है जो उन्हें 5 भाग में करना है, right? But the key lime remains. And what you're missing here is the context. I'm not talking about like some rural Indian context or any other kind of context, but here is a context that if key lime pie, the whole crux of that problem is that it's round. You're solving a round fraction problem. So unless you translate that into a culturally contextual round thing, no one is going to, you can solve it to, translate it into Hindi, you can translate it into Tamil, you can translate it into Kannada, Bangla, whatever. But no one will be able to solve that problem. Because how many people in India know what a pie is, let alone a key lime pie, right? So I think that's a very good example of how important context is.
Absolutely, absolutely. It also translated it into Chabi Chuna, right?
Yeah, I mean, you exactly.
Never forget
And people do really think that if we are like, oh, we have to do contextual or culturally sensitive translation, then John and Mary have to be translated into Ram and Sita, right? But that's not the point. They can stay John and Mary, but the key lime pie is the problem there. So how do you even identify what these culturally important events are that need the focus?
Absolutely. And is that why India needs an LLM?
I think India needs an LLM, which absolutely, that's one of the reasons that India needs an LLM. The other thing is like, when you were talking about, India to the world, world to India. I was just standing outside for a second and somebody said, we are talking about AI for India. But we are also talking about India for AI, right? And I think the thing there is that in our context, India, the biggest advantage we have is diversity.
Yes.
Right? We're talking about population scale. We'll do population scale. To do population scale in India, you have to solve so many diverse problems, right? And once you know how to do that, you can really do it for the entire world. And that's like been like the philosophy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. Ganesh, sir, would you like to jump in? Cannot not include you in a conversation around languages.
Thank
also.
you. I love the points Kalika made earlier as well as now. Diversity should be viewed as a strength. I think the thought process, the seed starts here. I talked about how the Bharajan consortium was set up with a whole of government approach. Ontologically, we need to be integral, right? But functionally also we need to be integral. I mean, just saying we set up something and functionally you're not able to operate doesn't serve the purpose. Now, what does that mean? I mean, for example, at Bharajan, we have 7 consortium members across different IITs and triple IITs working together and see the strengths as complementary. I think that view is very important. The Sanskrit Subhashitam I said, one of those were, I didn't explain the meaning, but amantram aksharam nasti, nasti moolam anaushadam. There is no single root which is not of medicinal value. Now, is that diversity a strength? Absolutely, because you travel across the country, you'll find different roots in different places. If you adopt the same view across Indian languages, actually you'll find that, well, if you do word grouping on Hindi, right, since Kalika brought up Hindi, you will actually find that group words systematically bring the apparently separated suffix together, present them as a dependency graph. This amazing isomorphism across Indian language graphs. So we actually brought out a book called Samanvay with our colleague Professor Arnab Bhattacharya. Now, it's really this perspective that can drive India to actually be a leader for AI, right? How can we operate? I mean, obviously, we need to go organically. We may first do it for the global south and then for the world. So we may have to do it organically, but the vision has to be integral. And the last point here, I mean, the Bharajan summit we just concluded, I think for the first time, at least in my understanding, we got people from all the cutting edge Gen AI, LLM developers in India together. There's Kritrim, Intel, Intel obviously CPUs, and then there's NVIDIA for GPUs. We actually got together, IBM, AWS, and this cross-pollination should be actually viewed as a strength, right? Yes, so yes. The last point I want to make is, even from problem-solving perspective, right? You can have government departments push out RFPs. But if you don't have a holistic view, you would often have the operation is successful, but the patient is dead. Why? Because the RFPs are successful, the problem is not solved. So white papers are required with a collective mood, right? So that we actually solve the problem. I hope I made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a very, very interesting point that you made. Geeta, I'd like to bring you in here. The kind of work that Nirma is doing, especially, with AI and healthcare, extremely powerful. When it comes to sort of enablers and barriers, how how do you use it to scale such innovations in India, not just for private health but also for public health, which is where I think there's a big gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we heard from the previous panelist also about how do we make it cost effective, right? I think
Yes.
that is where the public-private
Yes.
comes in. But generally, if I think about India and how, AI use cases in India comes in the context of your question, right? We have a lot of problems here. It's not solved yet. We have almost 75%, or I don't know the exact number, but more than 75% of population in the rural areas who don't have a doctor to go to if they have fever or even a very, very high emergency condition. So the problems are all over the place. And obviously, that necessity, drives the innovation, and not always Western solution would work because of the cost requirements and so on and so forth. So it can be a powerhouse of AI use cases because we are seeing the problems, we are feeling the problems, and many of the problems are better solved if you are able to relate it from your heart. Like I say, there is hard work, there is smart work, there is heart work, I say, right? It's really where you connect up the heart to what you want to do. It goes much faster. So that is really possible, let's say, in India, because you see a lot of problems, right?
Yes.
Similarly, the kind of stringent rules that exist, let's say, of course, we are GDPR compliant and all that, what Prashant was saying. But when you start off in India, of course, there's DPDP law. Everybody's trying to figure out what that law looks like yet, and so on. But it's much, much easier to do, let's say, a pilot here, with proper rules in place, user consent in place, etc. And also, after the pilot, try out in real field as well. So that is an advantage. Like diversity is an advantage. Having problems around is also an advantage, or we can convert that into an advantage. The fact that huge population we have is also an advantage. So all of these we can take as advantage and actually innovate and solve problems which are solved in a very conscious manner. And that reverse innovation is really, really possible, right? Because anywhere you go, you want to save cost. I mean, nobody wants to put double the money when you can solve it at half, right? So that becomes relevant to the whole world, right? So in terms of, I think you asked about barriers or something. Yeah. So barriers would basically mean, one is on the mindset to think, big enough. Yes, I want to solve for my village, solve for my state, etc. But why not for the world? That thinking big, and how do you sort of design for scaling from the beginning itself? I think that mentality has to come. So once you're designing that way, then of course some of the barriers, particularly in healthcare, I feel is the clinical testing. The doctors are not so very, we need to have technologists and doctors coming together.
Yes.
And there's not huge incentive for people to participate in clinical studies and so on, which I think it can be a huge advantage. Also because, doctors are sort of, we have so much of population and they're serving like hundreds of patients every day. They don't have this extra time to do this extra innovation. So, I mean, I can see why that is, but, that becomes a barrier for clinically completely validating here. And also, getting international, possibly funding for an Indian company is not as easy as getting funding for a US, maybe that's a different topic, but I know there are investors, but I wanted to put that in as well, right? Because they say, why don't you flip your headquarters to US and then I'm here, here's the money, right? So that happens. So we need to figure out how we can bring up the credibility of Indian startups to a level that it is investable. So I can go on and on. Obviously, in a startup, you figure out a problem, you solve it, and that's the fun of it.
Yes.
Yeah, but maybe I'll pause here.
Absolutely. Anand, I'm going to bring you in since there was a conversation about funding, can't not. When you, as an investor, when you have to, probably invest in a startup, particularly AI for Bharat, if I were to use that. What are some key things that you that you keep in mind in doing that from an investor lens?
Yeah, I think AI for Bharat or whatever, right? So if you're building, are you very clear about the problem you're solving, right?
Yes.
So I think Shekhar talked about it like multiple. Is that a really deep enough problem that someone's passionate about?
Yeah.
And is it a large enough problem? And does AI give you an unfair advantage? I think I talked about it already. AI is a leveler, right? Why can't the next, you can pick your favorite, Google or a Meta or whatever, and the people, Microsoft, like the people running are Indians, the CEOs there. Why can't the next Google come from India? Think big, right? So why should we think just for Bharat, like I want to solve only for this small town and nothing wrong, right? I'm from, like, I have that background. So, but I think there are people sitting in small towns who, and 3 people can pick up a big enough problem and solve it. There are people doing that in Europe. If you go and look at companies, like if you take Spotify or Lovable, or if you take many companies, people like there are countries which have population of Bangalore, right? And then solving global problems. I think the big thing is picking problems that are large enough and thinking big enough and not restricting ourselves. I think the money is there, whether it comes from Indian VCs, global VCs, money will follow wherever, right? So like when there are good entrepreneurs solving for the big problems of changing the world, I think money will chase them, literally, right? So I think that's the ambition level needs to go up. It is happening already with the first generation of companies going public in India, right? The thing she talked about, it's now the reverse. Global companies want to flip back to India because you can list in India much easily than listing in the globe, right? India is one of the best markets for listing. So I think the tides are changing. The old rules don't apply. These kind of tectonic shifts don't happen often. When it happens, the good, amazing founders of India, from India and also around the globe, are going to step up and build some great companies.
Absolutely, absolutely. Prashant, I wanted to check with you when, I mean, you started the company, Cure AI, when AI was not as fashionable as it is today. We spoke about resource constraint earlier, particularly with India. At the time when you were starting out, did you get enough investment when you went out there? Because people wouldn't have exactly understood the impact of it.
I completely agree with what Anand said, right? That if you are solving the right problems and solving for the world, money will chase you. So
Okay.
you will get investment. I mean, I think I think somebody in the last panel also said, right? We are not thinking big enough. We are not thinking global enough, right? If we think, I mean, we have the talent to solve it. And for us, I mean, when we started Cure, we had an incredible advantage over everybody else. We had access to so much data, and we still have probably one of the largest radiology imaging databases in the world, which allows us to build much better algorithms than anybody else. I mean, so that access to data, diversity, we have access to a lot of different advantages in India, plus talent. I mean, talent is also there. So again, the question that I always have in my mind is, are we solving a foundational problem like you said? Kalika, is it the problem that you spoke about, is it a foundation problem or is it a use case problem? Because if it's an education use case, I can solve it using a prompt, for example, right? And am I building a foundation or a frontier model, or am I building a use case engine? And that is where we are building a next Google, Microsoft, or are we building a next Epic? I'm a healthcare guy, so talking about Epic, right? But
course.
we could be thinking about those as well. And I really believe that the advantage that India has, especially given that we have all these software services companies in analytics and AI, we could really be solving a lot of customer problems, and we know those problems with a lot of depth, right? And we could be solving those use cases with AI rather than developing. I mean, again, we could be using, I mean, I think of AI as internet or mobile phones, right? I mean, it's a technology that is available to us. So what can we do with it? How many problems can we solve? How big can we think? There is a lot to do. And I think India has the advantage to really build for the world.
Sorry, can I add something?
Please.
So if you take that example, right, healthcare, or if you take services in itself, it's a hundreds of billions of dollars industry in India. If you take healthcare, right, so if you break it down, what happens in the US from the time someone schedules to sees the doctor to the transcription to the medical coding to everything. If you take that whole process, it's tens of billions of dollar industry. A lot of that work happens in India today. And all of that is going to go, AI is going to change that whole industry. And we have an unfair advantage to be the #1 player there as a country.
Why
so
shouldn't
are
we
we
be? Yeah.
doing that, right? So
why shouldn't we be the ones doing it rather than somebody else, right?
Absolutely.
And the moment we start thinking of India as representative, we can actually get talent. So in the last 7 months, we have hired the top talent graduating from all the IITs back at Bharat Jin. Why? Because of inclusive mindset. If you're just trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, you'll probably just, either trim the square pegs, but the moment you appreciate that problem solving actually requires diversity, you're able to attract talent back.
Absolutely. Kalika, would you like to?
Yeah,
Yes.
so I agree with everything that's being said, but can I put a word of caution? So here is the thing, because this is a very exciting technology, like you said, it's a great leveler. We'll be able to kind of solve a lot of problems. There are a whole lot of problems to solve. Sometimes I feel that while a lot of us are rightly so, focusing on problems to be solved via AI, right? Use cases. What are the use cases? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of use cases in India. We are not imagining a future with AI. So this is a conversation I have with a lot of people. We are just so focused. You call it jugaad, I will say a pragmatic approach, right? We have a very pragmatic view of how to use technology, where to use technology. We are going to solve problems. But are we going to keep solving these problems? Do we expect that these problems will just continue forever? So what do we think is going to happen 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Are we still going to be building, I don't know, diagnostic tools for cardiac problems? Are we still going to be building tools for making education available? Or is this going to change the way we view education? Is this going to change the way we do healthcare? Right? And I don't think we have enough conversations right now in India about such things. And that I think when we start having those conversations, when we start taking those things forward, then it becomes India for AI, if I can say that.
Wow. In the interest of time, I would love to keep this conversation going with all of you here. But in the interest of time, I'm going to ask all of you this. If you had to bet on just one AI use case or sector where India could lead the world in the next 5 years, what would it be? Just one sector or use case. I'll start with you, Anand.
We talked about it, services, all kinds of services.
Okay. Kalika?
Language, multilingual.
Geeta, ma'am?
Prevention is better than cure. Yeah, there.
Absolutely. Prashant, what about you? Sorry.
India will lead in AI for digital public digital public infrastructure. Definitely, we have the advantages to do that.
Great.
I would again say language, which includes speech technologies, but by leveraging frugal compute. That's very key. I think there's crazy amount of redundancy in the entire pipeline, making it data efficient, making it compute efficient for language, speech. Thanks.
Absolutely great. Thank you so much, all of you. This was truly a wonderful session. Thank you all for being there.